I am at San Felipe del Morro, the castle fortress wall that surrounds Old San Juan in Puerto Rico. Old San Juan is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, along with the Great Wall of China, Taj Mahal, Stonehenge. It's an amazing place. It's beautiful. The people are friendly. The food is amazing. So join me on this trip around the Paseo del Morro as I share a story about how I arrived on this island, sailing 1,200 miles from the Florida Keys. This morning I am walking around the Paseo del Morro in Old San Juan. Behind me you'll see La Puerta de San Juan, the original gate to the city, where hundreds of years ago this was the only entrance to the city. I started this journey at the Cathedral San Juan Bautista on the Calle del Cristo, the oldest street in the Americas. The cathedral is the second oldest cathedral in the Americas. I love coming here, walking around the Paseo, looking at the colonial architecture of Old San Juan, and of course, El Morro. You can also see from here La Fortaleza, which is the oldest government residence in the Western Hemisphere. As we work our way around El Morro, I wanted to tell the story about how I arrived here in beautiful Puerto Rico. Me encanta. My life on this beautiful island is actually a great example of the law of attraction. Several years ago, I had a plane ticket to fly to Long Beach, California to help my brother move. But things changed, and so did my plans. I found myself with a voucher for a plane ticket on the airline, and 1 year from that, the voucher was about to expire. So I was working in a lab in the Midwest in a very cold winter and decided to book a flight the farthest south that the airline would go. In this case, it was Fort Lauderdale. So I started looking around at places to stay, different Airbnbs, and I found a berth, a cabin on a 42-foot Morgan sailboat for a pretty good rate. So I decided to go ahead and book that. I thought staying on a sailboat was exactly what I would enjoy, since I love to sail and have sailed since I was a child. In fact, my first trip sailing with my family off the coast of Maine on the old wooden Friendship sloop with Roger F. Duncan is what began this journey, I would say, all those years ago, beginning to manifest into reality this lifestyle, living on a tropical island. I remember being at the helm of this old wooden ship, this sloop, and just thinking how amazing it felt to be propelled by the wind through the water with the waves pushing off the hull. So fast forward to my trip, my cabin on a 42-foot Morgan out island. When I arrived at Boot Key Harbor in Marathon and boarded the 42-foot Morgan out island ketch with my new friends Terry, Jay, and Isaac, I settled in right away and we became pretty good friends. They offered to not just let me sleep on the boat, but to take me around the islands of the Florida Keys. So we spent the next few days catching lobster, fishing, visiting different islands. At the end of the trip, they said they were going to be sailing to Puerto Rico. So they offered for me to join them on their trip to Puerto Rico, which was coming up soon. So I returned to Indiana, back to my normal life, my normal job. It was the middle of winter, now February, and it was not too different from this cell right here. I remember sitting at my desk thinking, this is just not the life for me. I've always dreamed of sailing, living on a tropical island, and I started calculating the ways I could take 3 to 4 weeks off to make this trip to Puerto Rico with my new friends.
You can't drink all day if you don't start in the morning. Cheers. Cheers.
1 week later, February 6th, Bob Marley's birthday, I was called up to the office of our company to Human Resources and informed that I was going to be laid off with the severance package, so I wasn't that disappointed. So the first call I made was to my new friends to see if they still needed crew for their trip to Puerto Rico, which of course they did. They welcomed me with open arms and they were happy to have me come. I immediately started planning the trip back down to Marathon, get back on this boat, start provisioning, making repairs. I prepaid my bills, locked up my house, and returned to the islands with my new friends. I would say 1 week after being there, one night we're in the Marina Bar at Boot Key Harbor, having a great time, a few rum drinks, listening to some music, and the next morning we wake up to news of the lockdown. So the lockdown was terrible for many people, but for me, I was living on a 1965 Sparkman & Stevens custom Chris Craft sloop out on a mooring ball in Boot Key Harbor, which didn't seem too bad. And although they didn't let new people sail into the harbor, they would let us go out for the day to go fishing, lobstering, etc. So we were able to keep working on the boats, keep provisioning, etc. to be able to make the trip to Puerto Rico. Well, as you know, time went by. I don't know how long the lockdown lasted, but I think it was at least a month. To me, it was all just one big tropical blur. So I decided to come back to Indiana, sell my house, all my possessions, spend some time with my family, and then go back down when we were ready to sail, which I did. So I sold my house, I sold all my possessions, I spent the summer with my parents, and the time had come. It was now Thanksgiving of that year. I packed up my car, drove back down to Marathon. By this point, a few months had passed, so they were moving quite well on preparing the boats for the trip, and just kind of last minute details, repairing the transmission on Majestic, which was one of the boats that I was going to be sailing on. Also doing some work on Utopia, the boat I originally stayed on with Terry and Jay, and of course their boat Yellowbird, which Terry's son was coming down to captain with the crew that he was bringing with him. Finally the day came and we set sail from Marathon for an adventure I will never forget, the most amazing time of my life. We sailed 28 days through the old Bahama Channel, off the coast of Cuba, the Dominican Republic. We dropped anchor about 30 miles offshore in the Bahamas to do some sail repair on Utopia with a generator and a sailrite machine, which was impressive. So we had lost steering off the coast of Cuba in the middle of the night. And we found a small leak, so we repaired it, pumped up the hydraulic steering system, and we're back underway. Great wind, exceeding the hull speed of this Morgan and doing about 9 knots. The steering then failed again off the coast of Haiti about 30 miles. We were in 7 to 10 foot seas and the boat was just rocking back and forth violently. At that point, morale was pretty low. I was at the emergency tiller in the aft cabin. Isaac was working in the compartment below me as I was moving this heavy metal emergency tiller back and forth over his head, trying to correct in heavy seas as we were being pulled by Utopia by a rope. We made this hydraulic connection with a piece of rubber hose from the diesel fuel tank. And although we had it put together, we thought it was going to hold, we re-pumped up the pressure system, threw off the line from Utopia, and started sailing again. Within a matter of seconds, that hydraulic repair had failed. We put our heads together once again, we found some liquid nails, and we made marks on this neoprene tube, how far we needed to push the rubber hose on to get 3 hose clamps to be able to hold this pretty decent amount of hydraulic pressure in this steering system. So I remember Isaac saying, I have the hose pushed in for 2 hose clamps. So we tightened it down, we held our breath, pumped up the system, and back at the helm. The steering seemed to be holding. We set the autopilot, crossed our fingers, and nestled back in the cockpit, hoping that the steering would hold together, and it did. As we surfed 10-foot waves towards the border of the Dominican Republic, nobody said much. And we cruised these waves right onto the coast of the Dominican Republic late that night. By then, the seas had calmed down, we were in protected waters, and we anchored offshore. When we woke up, we realized that we were anchored right on the river that separates Haiti from the Dominican Republic. We could see Haiti off the starboard stern and the Dominican Republic off the starboard bow. This was the first time we'd stepped foot on land in nearly 2 weeks since we departed from Marathon, Florida and the Keys. We had plenty of food, plenty of dry goods. Of course, the cold beer ran out pretty quickly. We had limited refrigeration. But we did catch a lot of mahi and tuna on the trip. Every time we'd catch a fish, it was like the most amazing thing. We ended up on a small border town in the Dominican Republic called Manzanillo. I'm not even sure if it's on the map. On the map it was called like Castillo, Pepino or something like that. But we were anchored right on the border of Haiti and the Dominican Republic. This great little town that we explored. We met a lot of great people, made some new friends, had assistance getting fuel for the boats, riding on the back of a small motorbike. We spent quite a bit of money at the local grocery store buying some Dominican Republic rum and provisions. We ended up staying there nearly a week off the coast of Manzanillo, waiting for the high winds to calm down. Hi, I'm Trent. I'm in charge of lost steering, massive repairs, slight navigation, so often wrong.
Thank you very much, Trent. Nice to meet you.
Katie is the best crewmate ever we ever asked for.
Thank you, Trent. Amanda, would you like to say anything?
Hi, guys. I am grateful to be in the presence of the majestic crew who has just absolutely killed this trip.
Y'all have
in the best
too.
way.
We love y'all.
Dominican Republic!
Woo!
Of course, sailing to Puerto Rico is into the trade winds, headwinds, the whole way. So the entire time we were battling these winds, we were tacking. It's a 1,200-mile trip, but with all the tacking, I don't know, it ended up being much more than that. So we waited for these winds to calm down just a little bit. We had a meeting of all the crew to decide if we wanted to try and push through this headwind to make it to the next town of Luperon. We decided that we would make the effort, and it was challenging. Even with the boat engines on, there was so much headwind that we were at times only doing 1 to 2 knots, which is very slow. And of course, we had some pretty decent head waves as well. When we finally arrived at Luperon, we made some great friends. It was a very nice place. They had a marina restaurant. It was the closest thing we'd had to something, normal since we left. So we feasted. They had pina colada night. So I think their heads were spinning a little bit because I think we ordered maybe 10 or 12 pina coladas and just had them lined up on the table. Of course, ice was a precious commodity on the boat, and we didn't have it for many days. So we bought ice, we drank pina coladas, we made new friends, and then the time had come to venture on through the Mona Passage to Puerto Rico. Unfortunately, several of us got sick on the boats, some kind of bug that we spread around to all of us. So as we're leaving Luperon, we'd all been sick except for Isaac and maybe Terry and Jay. So as we head offshore, Isaac gets sick. And I remember I spent just under 24 hours at the helm by myself while he laid up in the cockpit with me, just throwing up over the side violently. I mean, I was genuinely worried about his health, because this was such a long passage to the west coast of Puerto Rico. He finally got better. One night I was at the helm by myself, and we were in a pretty heavy rainstorm. The water was just coming off the mainsail like a waterfall, pouring into the cockpit. As the winds picked up and the storm picked up, I had to wake up Captain Isaac to have him come up to assist. So Captain Isaac jumps up on the bow, starts bringing down the spinnaker sail. The spinnaker was on hanks and not roller furling, so it had to be done manually from the front. It's pitch black in the middle of a storm, and he's pulling it down. All of a sudden, this big wave hits us, rocks the boat. I look forward, and Isaac is nowhere to be seen. And I thought, he's, of course, in his underwear, probably, barefoot, no safety gear. And I remember thinking, if he's in the water, he's going to be hard to find, especially if he's unconscious. These are the dangers of sailing. And I recommend, if you sail anywhere, you should definitely have safety lines and wear safety gear at all times. But as I mentioned, these were your average sailing pirate types, had sailed their whole lives in much worse conditions and had been through much worse, including demasting a sailboat. So, as I'm getting ready to make maneuvers to turn the boat around just in case he fell in the water, he pops up, finishes lashing off the sail, and jumps back in the cockpit. He told me that when the wave hit, he just dropped down. It tried to push him off the boat, and he grabbed onto the stanchion base and held on for dear life. But he was okay. But then we had other problems. Yellowbird lost their transmission. They also lost rudder control. They were also having to steer with an emergency tiller. This was the last stretch of the Mona Passage towards Puerto Rico with many miles. I think Merrick, the captain of Yellowbird, had to lay out on the stern of Yellowbird, steering the boat for many hours through the night and through the day. The winds turned even more against our favor, and we ended up having to call the Coast Guard to assist towing Yellowbird the rest of the way into Cabo Rojo. That last night, coming into Cabo Rojo, across the Mona Passage, I was at the helm by myself. Captain Isaac was sleeping in the aft cabin. I look off the starboard side, and there's the Southern Cross, the constellation over the Southern Hemisphere. I look off to the port side, and there's the North Star. The North Star and the Southern Cross, the star constellations above the two poles of our Earth, visible in the same sky. I knew we were close to the equator. I couldn't believe it. After all these years of planning and manifesting, using the law of attraction to make my dreams come into reality, here I am in the Mona Passage on a calm night, clear with the stars so bright, and just in disbelief. The coastline of the Dominican Republic was very dark, but as we came to the coastline of Cabo Rojo, the city of Mayagüez was lit up on the hillside. And I remember sailing into La Marina Pescaderia in Cabo Rojo, in Puerto Real, and it was just so beautiful. After 28 days at sea, some heavy storms, some beautiful, calm, starry nights, we were finally in Puerto Rico. That next morning, we woke up and enjoyed the marina bar, the showers, water, ice, more pina coladas. And we took a group picture of all of us after 28 days of sailing together through difficult situations, boat problems, lack of water, everything. We were a team, we were united, and we were now together on this beautiful tropical island. The following morning, we took some of our crew to the airport. It was a short-lived Puerto Rican vacation for them, for sure. They had to fly back to work in Florida. And that would have been my journey as well, had I not been so fatefully let go of my job. So I'm grateful for that. And again, the law of attraction, everything always happens for a reason. Sometimes when we think that things are at their worst or things seem terrible, it's actually because there's something better that's waiting for us in the future. So we have to be patient, think about these things, and then accept it as they come. I had a fortune cookie once, and it said, train your mind to desire what the situation demands. That has never been more true than it is now in my life, as it was on the sailing trip. So train your mind to desire what the situation demands. After we dropped our friends off in the early morning at the San Juan airport, we walked around the city. It was very early and there was nobody here, much like this morning. The best time to visit Old San Juan, I would say, is in the morning. It's quieter, it's cooler, it's less windy, so it's really beautiful. As the afternoon approaches, there are more people that arrive, more tourists, more visitors. But after we dropped off our friends at the airport, we walked around Old San Juan, just amazed by the colonial architecture, the beauty. And we stopped at a restaurant called Barachina, but they weren't open. But a very nice gentleman, his name was Francisco, he was inside and he saw us and he said, hey, do you want to come inside and try a pina colada? So inside is this beautiful open air courtyard. In this building where Barachina is actually where the pina colada was invented. Many people don't know the pina colada was actually invented here on the island of Puerto Rico. And this building has a plaque on the front that claims that the pina colada was actually invented there. Not necessarily by this restaurant, but in that building. So we enjoyed some pina coladas. We made a great friend. He took us out the back door, showed us that we were right on the back wall of El Morro. And then we walked from there around the city, just in amazement of this new island that we had sailed to 1,200 miles, and now that I live on for the last year and a half. The central eastern mountainous region of Puerto Rico is where the rainforest is, El Yunque. In the western central mountainous region of Puerto Rico, we have the third largest underground cave network in the world, the largest on the Western Hemisphere. My favorite cave on the island is Cueva del Indio in Arecibo, where there's a great display of the indigenous Taino petroglyph drawings. I recently visited Cueva del Indio and will be releasing a video about that shortly. If you would like to see that video and the many others I have coming up around the island, beautiful places of Puerto Rico, then please subscribe to my channel. I would be so grateful. I'm not doing this channel for anything else other than being an American living on the island of Puerto Rico. I've been here for a year and a half now. And I really just want to highlight the beauty, the culture, the people. It's important when you visit here to try to speak the language. Most people are amazingly bilingual, but show some respect. You know, it begins with respect. As we make our way out of the Paseo del Morro, please keep in mind that sometimes this gate is shut, so you may have to turn around and walk back. We are now approaching the grassy lawn in front of El Morro, very popular for flying kites. Beautiful. So we just finished up the regatta here in Puerto Rico, the first one since 1992. A lot of the tall-masted ships came in from all around the world. from Mexico, from Brazil, from Uruguay, and from Colombia, which I was able to visit that, the Gloria, very nice ship with an amazing crew. Also, they had some smaller sailboat races, a lot of sailboats coming in, so it was a really amazing time for me to see all the different boats and of course celebrate 500 years as a city. So we have been celebrating since last year because the Spanish settled San Juan in 1521. I hope you've enjoyed this trip around Paseo del Morro and some of the highlights of Old San Juan, as well as my story about arriving here by sailboat, a 1,200-mile journey through the old Bahama Channel. So remember, as you travel around the world, it's one world, one love, one people. We have to love each other. Peace.